Good morning. It is Monday, March 30th, and this is today's American History Lecture looking at JFK and the Cold War. Our question today is, how was the Cuban Missile Crisis resolved? That'll be on the Teams app where you'll be able to go in and answer that question. Each day, when you get your question, you just put in your answer and turn it back into me. I go through, I read them, I grade them, and submit it back to you. And if you miss a day, just answer it the next time. So when I open it up, I'll see that you got two, and I'll know to go back and give you the credit for the other one. Okay, it's the best way we can do this and kind of move through. Okay. The other thing is all the work last week. We went and got that all taken care of. It looks like we're going to be at this for a little bit longer. As you know, when this originally started, we were supposed to go back to school tomorrow. The governor said we would stay out until the 8th of April. But then last night, in the president's address to the nation, he said that he was extending it until April 30th. So we anticipate the governor will follow suit and extend it till the 30th also. So we may be at this for a while. I encourage you to make contact with your classmates that you know well and tell them about the Teams app, tell them about the YouTube stuff. I have a few who have not made contact with me through this process. I will start this week and directly email. And if email doesn't work, then I will directly call the families of those who do not make contact through the Teams app. This is going to be our only way to conduct class, at least until the 1st of May. So I would encourage you to talk to your friends and classmates and tell them what's going on and make sure and ask them if they've contacted me. In saying that, I also want to say that if you are missing a test or you are behind somewhere in American history class, if you will send me an email through the school email, I will respond to you. And if you're missing a test, I'll try to get that test sent out to you so you can try to take that test to help get your grade back up where it needs to be. Okay. I'll use email as I would tutorial, but you have to make the effort. You have to contact me and request makeup work or the test that you're missing. Okay. And there's a few of you out there, but that's okay. We can work through this. We have a month to get this all taken care of. These lectures will be somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes, roughly. I'm not going to go 40 minutes long. I realize you have other classes, and some other classes require more work than what this class does. So I will try to keep things on an even keel so that you don't have a whole lot. It may be lecture notes every other day and just a short message the other days. Okay, we'll just see how this plays out. So chapter 8, section 22 is JFK and the Cold War. When Kennedy came in the office, the Cold War was already going. He already knew that there were already tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States, and really between anti-communist countries and communist countries. There was a lot of tensions there. In Kennedy's inaugural address, in which I put a link, YouTube link to a portion of his inaugural address, there's a quote here in the book, and he actually says the quote in the link. He was addressing the world and addressing the Soviet Union. Says stuff like, let the world go forth from this time and place. And he has some other things he says. And he says that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and a bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slowing down of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed to. But the entire quote is in there. Kennedy knew he was going to have to face off against the Soviet Union, knew that there were going to be some issues. Kennedy attempted to reduce the threat of nuclear war to stop the spread of communism with a range of programs. They're going to include conventional weaponry program, economic aid, and the Peace Corps. Kennedy came into office and realized that the Eisenhower years had built up tons of nuclear weapons, more than you would ever need. And I mentioned this before, it really is ironic how many nuclear weapons would it take to destroy the world? Well, we hope we never find out. But we had surplus. So did the Soviet Union, so did any other country who had nuclear capabilities. Were building a surplus. I mean, we were making subs that could launch nuclear weapons. Okay, so Kennedy felt that there had to be other ways. One of the ways was flexible response. To allow for flexible response, if nations needed help against communist movements, the president's push for a buildup of conventional troops and weapons. Although costly, a flexible response would allow the United States to fight a limited style of warfare. Okay, in adopting a plan, Kennedy supported special forces in the Mill Army that was created in the 1950s. They were to wage guerrilla warfare in limited conflicts. He also allowed them to wear their distinctive Green Beret headgear. So the Green Beret were formed in the 1950s, and Kennedy pretty much let them continue on and let them grow to be the fighting force that they are today. If you want to be an elite Army force, you need to try to get in the Green Beret. That is the force. With Marines, it's the recon groups. There are special Navy SEALs, things like that. So those are those groups. They all came after the Green Beret. Okay. Kennedy also wanted to do aid, and some of the areas he wanted to aid was Latin American countries. He tried the Alliance for Programs. This was to improve relations between Latin America and the United States. Kennedy proposed the Alliance for Programs, which is a series of cooperative programs with Latin America and governments. Over a 10-year period, once Kennedy initiated this, the United States pledged $20 billion to help Latin American programs. Now, as in all situations, there were quite a few countries that did well. Chile, Colombia, and Venezuela, and Central American republics, they did well. They used the money properly. But there were also others who their rulers took the money and used that to keep them in power. So it had mixed results. Kennedy had a good program, but it came with mixed results. After 10 years, this program pretty much faded away. Okay. The other thing that Kennedy got going was the Peace Corps. Okay. The Peace Corps was an organization that sent young Americans to foreign humanitarian services in other countries. They would go through rigorous training. They spent 2 years in countries that had requested assistance. They did things like lay out sewage systems in Bolivia, trained medical technicians in Chad. Others taught English or helped build roads. By late 1963, thousands of Peace Corps volunteers were serving over 30 countries. Today, the Peace Corps is still active, and that's one of the longest lasting enduring legacies for Kennedy was the Peace Corps. Something that he believed in, something he got going, okay? The Cold War is going to move into space, and it's going to start the space race. We already talked about Sputnik. We've mentioned it a few times. The vying for dominance of the heavens to embrace competitions on Earth, okay? They started this. Kennedy's dream was realized in 1969 during Nixon's first administration when astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first person to set foot on the moon. So getting to the moon was one of Kennedy's goals. He started the Apollo program through NASA and got things going. Unfortunately, because of what happened to Kennedy, he did not realize that dream. Okay, he would not live long enough. Okay, now there were some crises in the Cold War during Kennedy's time. The first crisis was the Bay of Pigs. 90 miles away from the American shores, Fidel Castro had overthrown the corrupt Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista in 1959. Immediately, Castro established ties with the Soviet Union. The prime minister then, Nikita Khrushchev, was also expressing his interest in strengthening the Cuban military. President Eisenhower had authorized the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, to secretly train an army of Cuban exiles as La Brigada to invade the island. And the invasion was intended to touch off a popular uprising against Castro. Kennedy agreed to the operation with some changes. On April 17, 1961, 1,400 armed Cuban exiles landed at the Bay of Pigs on the south coast of Cuba. The invasion was a disaster. La Brigade's boats ran upon coral reefs. Kennedy canceled the air support to keep the United States involvement a secret, and the popular rising never really happened because Kennedy withdrew his support. It was a disaster. It was a dark moment for the Kennedy administration. The action exposed an American plot to overthrow a neighboring government, and the outcome of the United States made this look weak and disorganized. Shortly after that, beginning in June of 61, Kennedy is going to face with another political challenge. He met with Khrushchev in Vienna, Austria. The Soviet leader was determined to test the resolve of the young president. Khrushchev also wanted to stop the flood of Germans pouring out of communist East Germany into West Berlin. He demanded that Western powers recognize East Germany and that the United States, Great Britain, and France withdraw from Berlin, the city lying completely in the East German territory. Kennedy's going to refuse and reaffirm the West's commit to Berlin. Khrushchev retaliated by building a wall through Berlin, blocking movement between Soviet sector and the rest of the city. He posted guards on the wall, and for nearly 30 years afterwards, the Berlin Wall stood as a visible symbol of the Cold War and division between East and West. We know that before Reagan left office, the Soviet Union fell apart and the Berlin Wall was taken down. Later on, when we get into that part of history, I'll add a clip to show Reagan demanding that the wall be taken down and the gates be opened. But I'll save that for later, okay? Now, this brings up the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay? The most terrifying crisis of Kennedy's administration was the Cuban Missile Crisis. Over the summer of '62, American intelligence agencies are going to learn that the Soviet technicians and equipment had arrived in Cuba, and the military construction was in process. October 22nd, Kennedy announced at television that the American spy planes had taken several photographs showing that the Soviet Union had placed long-range missiles in Cuba. Kennedy's going to order a naval blockade to stop the Soviets from delivering more missiles, demanded that they dismantle the existing missile sites, and warned that any weapons were launched against the United States, he would respond fully against the Soviet Union. Now, the war's going to continue for a while. There's going to be some secret negotiations. The Soviet Union offered a deal. It would remove the missiles that the United States promised not to invade Cuba and to remove its missiles from Turkey near the Soviet border. So the Soviet Union was basically retaliating and putting missiles in Cuba because there were missiles in Turkey that could reach out and strike the Soviet lands. Okay. The reality was that neither Kennedy nor Khrushchev wanted a nuclear war. Only lunatics who themselves want to perish or before they die destroy the world would do this, wrote the Soviet leader. That was a quote from him. So on October 28th, the leaders reached an agreement. Kennedy publicly agreed not to invade Cuba. So he went public, a national address, said he was not going to invade Cuba, and privately agreed to remove the Turkish missiles. The Soviets agreed to move their missiles from Cuba, and the world was able to breathe again. Now, this is going to have a lasting impact because now the United States and the Soviet Union had came head to head, and people were going to wonder what was going to happen next. In August of '63, the United States and Soviet Union concluded years of negotiation by agreeing to a treaty to ban the testing of nuclear weapons in the atmosphere. Okay, that was one thing that happened. The United States, forced upon Soviet leadership, undermined the position of Nikita Khrushchev and contributed to his fall from power the year later. The crisis gave the Soviets evidence of their military inferiority and helped produce dramatic Soviet arms buildup over the next 2 decades. The United States, let's see, this buildup contributed to comparable military increase in the United States in the early 1980s. And for a time, the arms race undermined American support for negotiating with the Soviets. We're going to build up military on both sides. We are going to have some conflicts, and as we move through, we'll talk about some of those. We already kind of hit over Korea. We didn't talk about it a lot, but we're going to get into Vietnam and talk about it a little bit as we go through. The last thing in this section is the death of a president. Soon after the Senate ratified the test ban treaty, Kennedy's presidency is going to come to an end. On November 22nd, 1963, Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline are going to arrive to Texas. With Vice President Johnson, they're going to be there for some political appearances, and they get into a presidential motorcade and roll slowly through the streets of Dallas. They were in a convertible. And most of you have seen this. And if you want to go to YouTube and look up videos on the Kennedy assassination, there are quite a few of them out there. You can also find conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. As they go through an area in Dallas, shots are going to ring out, and the president's going to get hit twice. Once in the throat and once in the head. A little bit later, they find Lee Harvey Oswald in a theater. He is accused of killing Kennedy. He was a Marxist who had spent time in the Soviet Union. And then he was shot to death while in police custody by Jack Ruby. I'm not going to go into conspiracy theories. You can go out there and check them out. In 1964, a national commission led by Chief Justice Warren concluded Oswald was a lone assassin in the report of the Warren Commission. I don't know. There's a lot of things out there. If you really want to know more about this and his assassination and the possible conspiracy theories, like I said, go to YouTube and search it out, or do a Google search. You'll find all kinds of information out there, even stuff that's been done here recently. Okay. Kennedy served as president for a little more than 1,000 days. His powerful personality and approach to the presidency made a profound impression on most Americans. Aided by the emotion that followed the president's death, Lyndon Baines Johnson would set out to promote many of the programs Kennedy had left behind. Tomorrow's section will get into Great Society and Johnson taking the reins. And we'll kind of see how that goes from there. I will have messages for you every day. Sometimes it'll be discussions of the section. Sometimes it'll be telling you what I'd like for you to do during the day. It looks like we're in this for at least another month, so we need to work together. Again, I'll mention that if you're behind on anything, if you're missing a test, email me. If you email me, I will see what test you're missing and see what work I can give you to get you caught up, to try to bring you up to where you need to be. I'll use that like I would tutorial. Email me if you have questions. Or you can call me at the school number at 217-639-5099. Leave me a message. I check my messages a couple times a day. If you call me, I will get back to you. I encourage you to stay safe. I encourage you to follow social distancing guidelines. If you're one who has to go out and go to work, be safe while you're out at work. Take care of yourself. I would very much be ready to meet with you again in May and see all of you and see that you've made it through this healthy without any complications. I'll be back tomorrow. Enjoy your day and contact me if you have any questions. Have a good day.